Boom. And we are live with another episode of the Brown Water Banter podcast. My name is Jared Seymour.
My name is Joey Cates.
That's right. And we have a great show for you this evening, man. Said it right this time. We got Mark Havard in the studio here from Two Crackers Oyster Company.
That's it.
I nailed it, dude. I nailed it. I'm so proud of myself. We're going to jump into all the things about farming oysters. I'm going to say it right.
Yeah, farming oysters.
We were talking before we went live. We had Joey. It was about a year ago now, which is scary. Arguelles, Mike.
Mr. Mike, yeah.
Mr. Mike on the show. So we've kind of covered this topic before, but I think we got some cool new stuff to update and talk about once we jump into it. So it's going to be a fun time. Everybody stay tuned. But before we do that, we're going to jump into the people who help us keep the show rolling, man. That's right. Our sponsors, the sponsors of the show. First one right out the gate. Dr. Robbie Williams, right over here at Southern Magnolia Smiles, located in Ocean Springs on Washington Avenue. Keep your mouth clean is all we need to say, man. He's put
that's great advice.
Just
for life.
Keep your mouth clean, man. That's a great advice, exactly, for life. And when you're ready to start doing that, give him a shout. He's on Facebook and Instagram at Southern Magnolia Smiles. You can check him out. Here's a picture of him and his friendly staff, the team that he's put together. Or give him a call at 228-215-1202 and make that appointment, man. So next up, right out of the gate here, Jesse Hill and his team over at Hilltree Marketing. Go check them out at hilltreemarketing.com if you need a website built for any reason. They are your one-stop local shop. He can do photography, videography, aerial drone, cinematography. He's the total package, and he's all local, which means a lot. And take business you doing to the next level and make you have that like real strong presence online. It's very important. If you've never noticed before, go check out anybody that you've heard of brand wise that you dig. They probably got a really good website. So step your game up, hilltreemarketing.com, send him a message, tell him you heard about him here on the Brown Water Banter podcast, or jump over to brownwaterbanter.com and look what he did for us, because we're super proud.
Because we won an award.
That's
Two of them, actually.
Our buddy Rocky over at Swamp Man Exit. If you're looking for apparel, local stuff, man, he's got rods, reels, tackle, outdoor gear. He's got, I think he's still got Fish in the South hats. We're trying to get rid of those, trying to get him to get rid of those out of the store. But he is also selling Brown Water Banter hats too. So that's kind of cool as well. Go check him out. He's on Facebook. See the #2 Swamp. Check him out, and if you're over there, Gaucher Van Cleve Road, go stop by.
Yeah, he's got some hunting stuff too. Hunting season right around the corner. Already started bow season, so if you look, I think he's got some tree stands and stuff like that. Yep. So go check that out as well.
I love it. And next, we got Calvin Taylor. He's running for circuit judge. The midterm elections are going to be November the 8th. We've talked about it on the show a bunch, and we're. And so when you see his name on the ballot, service here, started in Pascagoula. He's about 2 episodes back, I think, Joey. Yeah. You can listen to his whole story there. We did an episode with him. Scroll down the playlist there and go check it out. It was a great show. He's got a lot of experience. He knows what he's doing, and he's rooted here in the community. We highly recommend Calvin Taylor for circuit judge, running for Jackson, Green, and George. Big news, man. We're
gonna be out there Friday night.
That's it. I can't. I'm clicking, but it's not. What's going on here? Are we all the way froze? Are we even still live? I don't know. Let's see. The flyer's not coming up. Let me try this. Nope. Everything's frozen. There it went. Love it. It's not a real internet show until something freezes technology-wise on you. If you don't have a story, you don't really do one. So the 4th annual Down Barbecue Throwdown put on by the Pascagoula Men's Club. We've also recently done an episode of them that's it's just a whole meltdown. Saturday, downtown Pascagoula, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., free to the public, live music. What it is there's a barbecue competition. They got 2 categories. The pro, it's be fun. And if you it's really cool, and you're not going to regret it. So that's this Saturday, downtown Pascagoula. Nailed it. All right. I think you saw on your phone. Are we still live? I'm getting
off the internet.
Yeah, I'm getting the internet signal over here, and that's kind of frustrating because it says we got good internets, and I'm going to check it one more time. This has happened before on the show. This is nothing new. But usually it doesn't. Let's see. Anybody in the comment section below could let us know that we're rolling okay, and we'd appreciate that. I think we're live. I know we are. I just hope it's not like glitching crazy. So, Sparklight, let's get it together. Help us out here. We'd really appreciate it. But let's jump into it, man. We're just gonna keep. Where do we?
History.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm Mark Havard. We own Two Crackers Oyster Company. It's a family-run business. I couldn't do it by myself for sure. Originally from George County. I lived on the coast probably for 22 years. Happily married to a girl from Ocean Springs.
Oh, yeah. So you're poor like me?
That's exactly right. Exactly right. But it's all good. We have 2 boys that we raise salty. We raise them in the water. If we couldn't raise them in the country, I wanted to raise them on the water. So we were blessed enough to be able to do that here in Van Cleve.
Right.
I was in the corporate world for about 13 years. Well, actually, probably in the corporate world for more like 20 years. And my life, I ran that a little over a year and a half ago, and I knew that I wanted to raise oysters one day a week and do consulting the rest of the time, and it's worked out beautifully. And so I'm doing oysters one day a week, Fridays, and that's how Two Crackers Oyster Company came about. Is that we love to be in the water, being in the water with a cat in a boat their whole lives.
Right.
Taught them how to catch brim from Bluff Creek at our pier all the way to catching grouper on the shelf. You know what I mean? Those boys have learned how to fish from.
Got some salt in their veins.
They got some salt in their vein. You know, I hope that it'll stay there forever. And I've had a captive in a boat for a long time and want to continue to do that. And then this came across, I sat on the CMR for about 5 years, and we kept on getting presentations about culture.
Right.
I was like, what the world is that? Oysters. You know, I don't know a whole lot about oysters other than I like to eat them just about any way you can cook them.
Right.
And
yeah.
So typically I can shoot holes in just about any business idea. But this one, you know, kind of struck a chord. You know, and so we can maybe create a business on the water. I was like, it'd be fun. The demand's there. You know, the oyster, I guess the farming operation of oyster and the natural resource that we have can't keep up with the demand worldwide with oysters. You know, everybody loves them that much.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know, this is something that lasts a long time. You got to learn the whole cycle of life and it'll force us to go out on the water once a week, whether we want to or not. And at that time we started.
That's a good thing.
It is really a good thing, man. At that time we were going out on the water 2 and 3 days a week. Like once a week, and I have that special time with the kids, and so that's kind of what we started. You know, we heard about it presentation wise over and over, and I'm like, let's do it. So we went to sit through this class that's offered from the DMR, the Department of Marine Resources, that I'm sure that you guys have heard about before. It's a year-long class. It's 8 or 9 Saturdays out of the year,
and this was open to the public. Anybody, any Joe Smo off the street could go do that.
Any Joe Smo, they wanted to work, because anything to do with oysters is work.
I said it because that's
farming is work.
Farming is work. Yeah. When you're raising rocks, you know, that means it's heavy work. So so after a presentation, I was like, you know, I'm gonna look into this a little bit further. So we sit through the classes and everything. I think you gotta be 21, maybe 18 at least to go sit this class. We got caught by the COVID epidemic, so our classes were kind of cut short. So we had to learn a lot of this stuff on our own.
Right.
But you know, they were always a phone call, so we could call and ask questions, whatever the case is. So we raised a bunch of oysters. I think they probably gave us 8,000 oysters, gave us the cages, gave us the gear to let us use for a year, and let's raise a batch of oysters if we wanted to do. We're going to continue on our own and lease property, buy our own gear, and all that good jazz. And after we went through for a year, man, this is all right. You know, I learned that it beats up a boat really fast.
Oh, so yeah, you better have aluminum boat.
Well, aluminum boat or an old fiberglass boat.
Yeah.
You know, we started out, when we first got into it, I brought my small Carolina skiff out there. That's a color, you know, it's a nice little river boat.
Mm-hmm.
And it took about one time to go out there before it hit a couple barnacles, and it was over at that point. Big old gashes down the side. I said, we've got to come up with a different vessel to start with.
Yeah.
So, country boys pretty well. I got a lot of deck space.
Right.
So I was like, party barge is the way to go.
Absolutely.
I've never had a party barge before. Didn't know anything about them, but I knew they were cheap and I could get a lot of deck space.
And if you tear it up, you just got to put the pontoons, re-weld the pontoons, and throw it back in the water.
Right, that's right. So what we did, we found a little cheap pontoon boat, had a decent engine on the back. We took all the furniture off the front. So we had this big platform to work with. I mean, it was definitely transom heavy. It was bow light. So we had to put a cooler in the front just to get real quick.
I don't know what to do. It's the internet for whatever reason. Well, the audio is going to be fine, but the video is clipping. So the only thing we could possibly do is shut it down and restart it. But I don't see how that's going to help anything.
Well, he's jump.
Yeah. I don't know. We could just keep going, and the audio is going to be fine. It's just the video that we're going to have to worry with. That's it.
You good with that?
I'm good with it.
Yeah, let's make it work.
Audio is probably better in my case anyway.
It really is.
You got a face for radio like us?
Well, it's exactly right. It's kind of why I wear a beard. You know, it hides the ugly. Right? So it works out good.
So was this a grant after BP or something? How did this whole, what you said, bottom dwelling?
Hard to so yeah, process. I don't know what grant funded it, but we used to be one of the largest oyster producers in the country at one point in time.
Right.
You know, I've seen old pictures where there's just mountains of oyster shells all up and down the coast.
My grandpa had one at the Beau Rivage. Right in front of the Beau Rivage, there used to be just mounds and mounds of oyster shells.
And they paved roads with them. They did all kinds of stuff with these oyster shells, but they didn't realize that the shells need to go back. I mean, it was a resource that it takes years for it to replenish. So, you know, we did what humans do. Hey, a little bit's good. That means a lot's better. But once you get that foundation, that concrete, once it goes away, you don't have anything that'll stick. It just falls in the mud.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's happened is we plowed our reefs up harvesting oysters so much that all we have is mud left. So that's where all these grants has been coming along for years and years to try to get that foundation back. And that way, when the oysters, you know, the big-eyed larvae is what they're called when they first get spawned, is called big-eye larvae. And under a microscope, it really looks like a little microscopic dot with an eyelash sideways. So once this eyelash gets produced out there, it finds something to stick to. And if there's not a rock or some kind of culture material out there for it to stick to, it's all buried in the mud. It just keeps on going down the ocean stream
until it sticks to something.
You know, and or fish eat them, or get filter feeders eat them, whatever happens. You know, so that's where they come up with this off bottom aquaculture, and they were like, you know, if we could spawn these things in captivity and then create little oyster seed is what they're called, and they're rated by R1s all the way to R19s, and it's just size, you know, and they raise them up to about R2s, and at that point they start selling these things, and they're sell them as seed, and you can get
these things are like as big as your pinky, right?
Yeah,
not even that much.
They're not even that much, man. We start off, we buy R2s to R4s, sometimes R6s. R2s are much smaller than a pencil eraser. R4s are about a pencil eraser size, and R6s are about pinky nail size. Just your average pinky nail, of course. So you buy these things in a bag, and you start off putting them in a small mesh bag, and then at that point you put them out today, you go back next week, they've almost doubled in size. So it's like, wait a minute, that one bag that they were all in, I got to put them in another bag. So I can, in this Yeti cup here, this Two Crackers Oyster Company Yeti cup.
There we go. Nice.
That's right. So I could put about 15,000 oysters in this cup when I buy them. So it's like, wait a minute, they're too small. I don't know how in the world I'm keep track of them. You know what I mean?
How fragile are they? What's the yield out of, if you get 10,000, do you usually get 10,000 oysters, or do you know the math on that?
Yeah. So in my opinion, I'm good at books during the week, but on Fridays, I don't want to think about numbers at all. It's kind of like the guy that cuts grass. You know, his yard always, not always the best.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's me. I don't want to think about numbers. And I know that I can't prevent these things from dying. So really, what's the point in keeping an exact figure?
Yeah, I'm just saying, do you got to handle them a certain way? You can't. I'm guessing you can't throw them on the side of the boat. You can't keep them out of water too long.
Ones, when they're small like that, their shells are soft, of course, because they're real thin. They're paper thin at that point. And then when they start getting about quarter size, at that point, they get a little thickness to their shell. So you can start being a little rougher with them.
Right.
But they start off, they're real fragile. They're fragile, as they say.
Yeah, I like what you said earlier though about the erosion. You know, when the oyster reefs are gone because they've been over harvested, and we've all seen the photos from like the 40s, 50s, maybe even so far into the 60s, where it's just massive mounds of oyster shells. People didn't think back then, you know, with the conservation mindset, because it was all new as far as the ability to get out there and harvest that many, right? Because prior to that, they were using schooners, right, to get out there. Then you get the outboard motor, and more people can go out there and do it. But it really does affect the coastline when you remove it. So I guess my point is, it's not just fun. They're not just fun to eat. They play a vital role in the waterways around here for not only erosion, but also too for filtration, right?
Filtration. So one mature oyster can filter up to 55 gallons of water a day.
That's crazy.
So if you think about a 55-gallon drum, one little oyster filters that much every day.
And just because crackers and horseradish sauce
and hot sauce
and cocktail sauce just so happen to mix well with those little bastards, we've lost a ton of them. It's an environmental issue because they taste so good.
That's exactly right. It used to be called the poor man's food, but then all the poor men, we just kept on growing and growing, and
the rich people they figured out. I was like, are these people on something? What's going on here?
That's right.
I want to be poor too.
Yeah, exactly. I know what we'll do. Jack the price up on them, and then you got to be rich to eat them.
That's right.
There you go. Exactly. Problem solved.
So, you know, with all the grants and different things, the culture material is getting put out there. Hopefully it'll help rebuild our resource that we have out there. But there's no guarantee. We're raising a different oyster than they're raising in the wild anyway. We're raising the same type. It's a diploid oyster. So it has 2 chromosomes, one on each side, and it can reproduce. It's the same oyster that grows in the wild, literally.
Okay.
So it takes about 3 years for the wild oyster to get to a mature size, because so many of them get eaten by drills, oyster drills. They get eaten by crabs, different things. So much loss, you know what I mean? So they have to grow a thick shell in order to survive. So, so that's where we play a part. We're growing these things out even from 12 to 14 months. The same oyster, same seed. We're just growing them in a protective bag in a floating cage. We use what they call a condo. They call a condo in different places. It's a 6-pack. That's basically what it is. 6 bags can fit in a cage. It's floating on a big line that we have. It's about.
It almost looks like a crawfish bag if you've never seen it.
Very similar. Very similar. So they're a little, I guess a little more formed.
Right.
They're a little rectangle.
If I remember right, when we talked with Mr. Mike about this the last time, y'all can even adjust the level of the water column that they're in to help them eat better, or did they feed off something different than they do naturally? I'm trying to remember that episode.
So the most nutrient-rich water column, from my understanding, is the top part of the water.
Okay.
So you want to keep them up closer to the top of the water column, because that's where all the nutrients are. Okay. Not all of them. That's where the majority of the nutrients are.
I just remembered him saying something about the fact that y'all do grow them quicker than what they would be in the wild, and there was a reason for that.
And that's because in that top column,
so you can keep them there, rather than nature pulling them down and getting to a low. Okay.
That's exactly right. And plus all these drills and different things, they can't swim, but somehow they still get in our bags at the top. I don't know if they crawl up these ropes or what they do. But
magic.
Somehow water.
Yeah.
I had no idea that was the case. I thought stone crabs only existed in Florida in large populations, but we don't see a lot of big stone crabs here, at least in our oyster equipment. But if a stone crab gets in there and he gets anywhere over 2 inches long, he will eat oysters until his belly's full.
Really?
And we don't know when to quit. You know what I mean? And so that's the reason you got to go through these bags and these cages on a regular basis to get rid of the crabs.
Yeah.
And the crabs grow really fast, whether it's blue or stone crab. They grow really fast. And only thing I can figure is they bite the beak off of the oyster. And then once they bite the beak off, they got a little hole to go in the front of it.
They just stick that claw in there and rip it out.
How big do they have to be for them to be doing that?
From what we're seeing is anything over a 2-inch crab, which is tip to tip on the shell.
Okay.
What
about the oyster size? What size oysters are they going after?
They could go after any size oyster. They don't care.
Okay.
And when you pull out one of these bags out of the cage, I mean, there might be literally 10,000 baby crabs that are like 1 inch long, like tiny crabs fall out of these bags. So, and if one stays in there longer than it's supposed to, it can't get out of the mesh. So
he grows up and he's got a buffet.
Yeah, really.
Sounds
great life.
Exactly. So what you want to do is get those larger crabs out of there really fast, as fast as you can, before they just eat all of your.
They've already figured it out. They already realize what's going on down there, right? And they're like breeding down there. It's a food source for them, right?
And all the time, different kinds of fish, and so it's a reef basically. It's a floating reef with all kind of aquatic life on it. So they've hit the jackpot when they've left in a cage.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. If there are any other predators besides that, because I know when we run crab trap stuff all the time, we get to deal with all nutrients.
No, where the farm is located on the south side of Deer Island, it's about an 800-acre aquaculture park.
Yeah.
So we don't have an otter problem. Our biggest threat, I think, is hurricanes and crabs. I mean, that's our biggest threat. And one time we had the Bonnie Carey open with
fresh water.
It killed it. You know what I mean? But hopefully they've resolved that issue, and that's a whole nother issue that we're not going to get into.
So it sounds like we need to start putting our crab traps right in front of the oyster.
Well, that's what I was just thinking too. It's like, should we be snapper fishing over there too, or like, is the speckled trout into that? Let me know.
I don't know, but the mangrove snappers, they're like 8 inches long, so we always try to be very gentle with them and let them go, because mangroves are really good to eat, as we all know. And so we try to let them go. Now, I can tell you there's some sheephead around there from time to time. I know you guys get into sheephead.
We have a tournament that we catch a lot of. Don't give any secrets out.
Well, it's legal for anybody to fish around our crab, or not our crab traps, our oyster farm. You can fish in between them. That's part of our regulation, is we have to leave enough room between our rows of oyster cages for navigable area for boats to go in and out.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we have to. So that's part of the requirement. So you guys are welcome to fish around anything. If a hook gets hung in our rope, please just cut the line. Don't try to cut our rope and all that stuff, because that's some people's livelihood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we spend a lot of time, more than money, out there. And time is of your opinion on how valuable it is.
It's worth more than that hook.
It is, man. It is. And but yeah, they do hold fish. This year I did see a few triple tail out there. They were all small triple tail. I look for big ones. I typically try to bring a fishing pole with me when I go.
Smart man.
But a lot of times, once I get involved in doing the oysters and sorting them and all that stuff, it's like I forget all about fishing. And then on the way home, it's like, man, why didn't I stop 10 minutes and fish? You know what I mean?
Because you're tired. That's why.
Because I just went to work for 12 hours.
That's exactly
What is that? How long does that usually take to harvest what you have now?
So let's start off with September. Mid part of September, I opened up harvest for this year.
Okay.
And this is the first year that I've had any quantity of oysters other than about 6,000 or 10,000 to harvest. And I was like, I'm just going to open the gates. We created a Facebook page just for the local folks. They wouldn't let us have our Two Crackers Oyster Company on Facebook. They kept on rejecting the name. So we were like, okay.
You can only imagine why.
Yeah, I'll give y'all one guess as to why.
So we backed up and punted. We just put my wife and I's name on there. We've never been on social media before.
You should have put Dose Crackers.
I could have tried that. Yep.
That would have worked.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, but it wouldn't let us on there. So we just put it on our personal name. And like I said, we're not Facebookers by any stretch of the imagination, but we do get it out there for marketing purposes. Because
you have to. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that's who we sell to. We sell to local folks. We don't sell to restaurants by design at this point. I want to sell to the people that are from here that like to eat oysters on the weekend on the grill or raw or whatever the case is, because really I don't know any other place that you can get Mississippi oysters locally
other than Deer Island.
There's a few farmers out there that sell to the public, but most of them go after the money. The money's more selling to restaurants or sending them up the East Coast to these white tablecloth places. And that's just not me, man. I like the peddling part just as much as I like the growing
like
part.
that. I like that.
Because most time we like to shoot the breeze a little bit.
Yeah.
You know,
and then you end up on a podcast.
End up on a podcast. That's how we did. Joey bought some oysters from me. And he's like, hey, man, would you want to get on a podcast? I'm like, I don't know anything about a podcast.
Yeah.
Is that how that happened? I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. I went and bought them oysters for the it was the barbecue that we did, or the cook that we did at Lee Torch's house.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, hey man, you want to come on the show and talk about it? Yeah, man, let's do it. I was like, yeah, there you go.
How'd you hear about him?
Somebody shared it out. I can't remember who shared it out.
Something on Facebook though, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was on Facebook. Okay. And somebody shared it out, and I was like, let me call this guy. And I was like, I texted him. I was like, hey man, I need to get whatever you sell them, man. What'd you sell them?
Yeah,
man?
so we sell them 2 quantities. We sell 50 count sacks or 100 count.
Oh,
yeah.
So you bought a whole set.
I bought a 100 count sack, brought them over to Lee Torch, and we shucked them and ate barbecue and all that stuff. It was great. And
nice.
when we were sitting at his house, I was like, hey man, I always do my pitch.
Right.
We run a podcast. You wouldn't want to come on and talk about it. And he was like, yeah, what's it all about? And I explained it, and that's why we're sitting here.
Sweet. I didn't even realize that part of the story. My wife chimed in on the comments. She said you could possibly change it to 2 saltines oyster.
Well, we could. Or 2 premium.
There you go.
Premium,
well, no, because then premium might shut you down on the trade name. Isn't that a trade name? I think of crackers, right?
Probably.
I think it is. Yeah, I think saltines is a generic. I think you can get away with that.
So it's just edgy enough that we're going to stay where we're at,
right?
And we're selling to the local folks, and it's been well received. Our oysters are quality oysters, and you think 100 count sack, and when you come to buy these things, people are thinking I'm going to sell them in a burlap sack that's going to take both of us to load them in the back of the truck.
No, they're not.
And when they get there and they see this little small mesh bag that's a little bit bigger than a basketball, they're like, man, I just got screwed.
Yes.
But once they start opening these things, they realize that we're not raising shell. We're not selling them by the pound.
That's right.
We're selling meat. We're raising meat.
So you can fit 100 oysters like that into.
It's about this big.
Yeah.
When you get the sack,
which a normal sack of oysters that we're thinking about looks like
it's a burlap sack, but most of the problem is. If you get a sack, it's usually we're going to go oyster terms here now. They're going to be clusters instead of singles.
They're going to be clusters full of mud. They're going to have barnacles on them. They're going to have mussels on them.
Well, what's the number of? Do they even count them by that?
No, they typically now they sell them by the weight.
Right.
So they're selling by the weight of the shell.
You're supposed to get
you're
supposed to get. My grandpa always said you're supposed to get a gallon of oysters out of a sack.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And I bought a bunch of those $25 burlap sacks, and I love sitting on the tailgate opening those things. But now I don't think that that's even available in the burlap.
Well, that was another question I wanted to ask you. We touched on it a little bit ago. Is like outside of what y'all are doing, and I think you already said this, but is there even any natural places to go get oysters that is of any quantity
in Mississippi? No,
here locally.
Well, I think they opened up the Tongan last year in Ocean Springs, but I don't think anybody got anything. I mean, like you're talking maybe a sack. Yeah. Maybe at the most.
Yeah, I'm not confident. I'm not sure if they opened it last year. I know the year before last,
yes,
they opened because like in 2004, we harvested. I'm gonna make these numbers up, but they're pretty close. Maybe 600,000 sacks out of Mississippi
in 2004.
In 2004,
and those are natural. Those weren't
natural oysters. Then after Katrina, and our reefs had gotten to a point where they were just diminished. There just wasn't anything left.
Well, that was the next thing. What was the lowest point in oysters on the Mississippi? Is that after Katrina?
After Katrina, that's just a timeline.
Right.
It had nothing to do with Katrina. It was just a timeline. And after that, it just kept on down.
That was fresh water. Everybody just getting as much. Because I remember, we had oysters in the bay, and my grandpa was like, "Don't ever eat an oyster out of the bay." You know what I'm saying? All that stuff that's coming down the bay, don't ever eat it. And even the ones out front, we get them, we go flounder and kick them around. He's like, "Don't eat them; they're nasty." You know what I'm saying? Because it's all the dang chemicals and stuff that was running off the beach and everything else.
It is. So the reason we can harvest and we can only grow oysters in this 800-acre aquaculture park is because this water is approved waters. It's tested on a regular basis to make sure there's no fecal matter, anything crazy out there. Make sure it's good 55 gallons at each oyster's filtering. So, and that's the reason you can't just go harvest when you want to.
Yeah,
from other places.
And they'll shut y'all down. Like when the Bonnie carry, they'll just completely
yes.
And you lost all your farm.
Yes. So if there's a big freshwater influx, they'll shut the farms down. They'll say, okay, guys, y'all cannot harvest. It's an official order. You cannot harvest. You can work your farms, but you cannot harvest any oysters out of your farm.
What would happen in the Bonnie Carey example if you harvested? I don't see how that would be. They're just going to kill them, right? How would that make them toxic or unedible?
So I'm not exactly sure on the science side of it, but I do know that when the Bonnie Carey, a lot of that fertilizer came out.
Oh,
of the
that okay.
Midwest,
I didn't think about
yeah,
that. The
yeah.
contaminants that's in the water. That's right. That makes
yes.
sense.
So they do all kind of tests.
I was
on the
just strictly
water.
thinking of it from a perspective of freshwater versus
Well,
salt.
even if they're
right.
dead, you don't want to sell dead oysters.
Well, I was thinking like harvested before it gets there too.
Yeah,
But you're right though. It's going to have all that spillway chemicals and
Sure.
stuff in it. That makes
Sure.
sense. Yeah.
And another thing, who wants to eat an oyster? It's not salty. Not
Correct.
me.
Correct.
Not
Yeah.
me.
Well, and a lot of people. We worked at the Better Lodge, and they go to the pasteurized oysters. And if you ever had a pasteurized oysters, it tastes just like an oyster. If you put a grape in your mouth, that's what it tastes like.
Yeah,
There's
it's
no
not-
salt to it.
Not good.
It's just like you spit out a loogie, and people love them. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to
That's
me.
because they've never had a good oyster.
Correct.
A good
And-
natural
And I made the
oyster.
joke earlier, but they're probably drowning it in horseradish and cocktail sauce.
Yeah,
It's not the
exactly.
one that you eat
It would
raw,
gag a
plain,
maggot.
and be like, "Wow, this is something." Here.
That's exactly right.
You know?
And a lot of times, in the past, a lot of these natural harvested oysters, they'll harvest the oysters when they're small, and the processors don't have to pay a lot for them because the meat's not very big. So what the processors do is they put them in a bubble bath, like a salinity bath. Basically, it's an aquarium bubbler in a salt water, so it bubbles up their gills. It puts that salt water in their gills. So when you go buy them from the grocery, a lot of times you're getting this big whopper of oyster.
Yeah.
And then when you fry the thing, it turns to some little shriveled up little oyster
because he's full of air.
He's full of air and water.
Yeah.
He has salt water.
Yeah.
But for the common person, they don't really care because they don't really know.
Yeah.
But when we harvest our oysters, they're as big around as your thumb. And it's meat, and it don't matter whether you fry it or do whatever. It's going to come out about the same size because it's meat. It's not water and gills.
Yeah.
Do you?
Well, that's the thing I noticed when I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
mean
go
to
ahead,
jump in.
go ahead.
But that's the thing I noticed when we got yours. They're usually about the size of a 50-cent piece, maybe around the 50-cent piece. And when you open it, the oyster covers the whole shell.
Yep.
Usually when you get clusters,
Right.
you know what I'm saying?
It's a
You'll
lot.
open this big gigantic oyster, be like, yeah, and the oyster's this big and the shell is this big. You're like, what the?
Yeah, I guess he had to hold on for in
Yeah.
real life. He
So
had
he
to
just
hold
moved
on.
into an apartment.
Yeah, here he's just kind of traveling around light. He's just carry on.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
It's growing meat versus shell. I mean, it's that simple.
And what causes it to do? What is there a reason why some of them are smaller in these big gigantic shells compared to what y'all are doing? You have an oyster that fits the shell that he lives in.
I think it's a survivability issue. They're sitting on the ground. These oysters are sitting on the ground. They're growing naturally.
Right.
And they're having to defend off oyster drills, crabs,
Yeah.
all kind of predators out there. So they have to grow this thick armor in order to survive. And I don't think the survivability, as a general rule, is very good in the wild.
Right.
So they have to grow a lot of shell, a lot of armor just to stay alive.
Yeah.
And then regulations say that, hey, it's got to be so long, it's got to be so big before you can harvest. And typically in wild caught oysters, they have a season. So when the season opens, say it opens November 1 and it closes, in December sometime.
There'll be 100 boats in one spot.
You got to harvest oysters. You don't care what the salinity's doing, how
Right.
salty the oyster is, or whatever. You're just trying to go make the money, trying to get the oysters in the boat, get them to the market. And here, what we're doing is we can harvest year round. So we can choose not to harvest when the salinity's low, like when it's less than 15 parts per thousand, we don't harvest.
Yeah.
Unless somebody says, "Hey, Mark, all I'm gonna do is fry these things, or all I'm gonna do is grill them."
Right. I'll add the salt.
I tell them, "Okay, well, I'll harvest for you, but if you want to eat any of these things raw,
Right.
man, I'm not gonna harvest these things. They're just not tasty."
What is your limit? I mean, where do you peg the gauge of salinity? And for people who are listening don't understand, that's how salty the water is. What is your parts
Per thousand.
Per thousand.
So it's
salinity?
15 parts per thousand is a good general rule of thumb. I've harvested some 10 and 11 before, and they're okay, but when they get 15, they're right. And
Okay.
right now, over the past probably 3 weeks, it's been 27 parts per thousand. So these things are like taking a shot of salt.
What's the
when you
highest
eat
you
them.
ever?
I've only seen
Right now?
30 before, and I seen it 30 last year. It's around this time frame, and it all depends on how much rain we get, how much
Right.
fresh water.
We ain't had
coming out of
rain
the
in a
river.
while.
We haven't, and I think that's probably the only thing that's been good out of not having any rain is it keeps the salinity high and it keeps the oysters fantastic.
What does it ever get too high?
Man, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't
either.
think so. You know,
like I'll always add salt to mine anyway.
yeah, you might have to have a little more fluid.
Yeah,
like when
yeah,
you eat these things,
might be a little dehydrated.
That's right. But other than that, you know, I don't think that'd be too salty because in Florida they grow them in a high salinity environment all the time. So, and it probably can be too high,
right?
You know, but I don't know what that limit is, and I don't think we have to worry about that in Mississippi.
I always was a fan of the Apalachicola oysters.
Yes,
the little brown ones. I always saw, and yours reminded me of them. They just didn't have the same shell color, but their oyster farm is getting hit from all that fresh water and red tide. They're taking a pounding over there.
They are. You know, that used to be the oyster capital of the world, is what I grew up hearing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the oysters were fantastic, but they went through the same issues that we had, Mississippi and a lot of states in the Gulf experiences, over harvesting.
Yeah.
And so now they had to go to the off bottom aquaculture as well. And but they're getting hit pretty hard. They got hit with the red tide and different things. Hurricanes, you know. So that's elements that we have to deal with. So we run the risk every year of losing everything we got.
Yep.
You know, and it's like, well, you sink the cages. Well, does
maybe
that work?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Maybe not. You know, so we've tried a couple different methods. Last year we tried, I guess it was maybe Ida or something like that. And I said, from the country boy that I am, I said, you know what? I'm gonna sink half of these things. I'm gonna sink, like, put them in the middle water column, and I'm gonna say, you know, that's not towing on the anchors too hard. It'll be just right, you know. But I was dead wrong when I did that, because what that did, that suspended them in the middle water column, but it twisted them.
Yeah.
And they kept on twisting and twisting until it broke my main line, which is a 5/8 inch rope. So it broke the main line. And then what happens? All my cages go in a big cluster, and the cages start beating on each other. When they start beating on each other, they're made out of wire mesh.
Oh yeah.
They just come apart.
So they come apart, you know what I mean? And these cages are costing about $300 a piece just for the cages right now.
Wow.
So we mended everything back that we could together.
It's crab trap wire, right? Same
No,
thing?
it's more like a cattle panel wire that's not wax coated.
Rubber coated.
Rubber coated.
Yeah.
But it's not thick as cattle panel either.
I guess a crab trap would be too big. They would just
crab
fall
trap,
out of it. Yeah,
crab trap, the wire's really thin, it's really pliable, but oyster cages are not pliable. So, you know, it's a thicker gauge steel that they use. So we're learning. Every farmer out there will tell you that we're doing the best we can every year,
right?
And with the hopes that we don't get hit with a big storm. You know what I mean? There's lots of methods out there. Hey, I'm gonna take everything to the hill. Well, you know what kind of job that'd be, to take everything to the hill and this thing only be a Cat 1 or Cat 2?
Then you got to bring it all back.
My goodness, man. You're talking about a lot of work, and you know, there's only about 7 or 8 real farmers or people that are trying to farm out there. Everybody's a real farmer.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, but everybody, you know, there's 7 or 8 of us that have more than 100,000 oysters out there.
Really?
Most, there's probably another 15 folks or farmers out there that have 20, 30,000 oysters. So they're called hobby farmers, which a hobby farm's a super cool thing to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, super cool. And you don't have a lot of money invested, and it's not a lot of work. But there, like I said, there's only 6 or 7 of us out there that are actually have more than 100,000. And it's because Mississippi, we're the only state that is trying to grow oysters directly, that has a direct impact from the storm. Most of these other states are growing them in bayous. They're growing them in, they have some kind of land protection.
Yeah.
But in Mississippi, due to what our waterways look like, we just don't have a lot of area to put these things.
No.
We don't have
you
bayous.
can think about maybe Fort Bayou, maybe the Pascagoula River, but there's so much boat traffic in there.
Yeah.
You have to shut everything down.
Maybe Gravelines, but Gravelines is such a big fishing hotspot.
Right.
You know, it shut down all the fishing because everybody couldn't get in and out. You know? So we're just our land mass that's the best place for us right now.
I was going to ask that how many farmers were out there? What was the number you said again that are over 100,000?
I think 6 or 7 of us.
Okay. And then another 15-ish that are below that.
That's exactly right. And I think there's been 3 or 4 classes, and these classes range anywhere, probably started out at 30 people.
Okay.
And then I think this last class, they ended up doing 9 folks. So there's not a ton of people. And a lot of people think of it, that's going to be a cool thing.
That's what I thought.
I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it. And then they realize, holy mackerel, man.
Well, I thought I was going to go sit through this class and plant some oysters and come back in 2 weeks and check them. You got to go out there the first month and pretty much flip them every other day, right? Because you put them on one side, flip them on the other side.
Yeah.
It's
that's
pretty
called
much work.
desiccation. So there's a couple theories behind that. So when you desiccate these things, basically what you have a 5x3 cage that these bags fit in. So it has pontoons on the top or on the bottom, ever how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
So,
and this is on the south side of Deer Island. If you don't know that, go on the south side of Deer Island. And I almost ran over them the first time because I didn't know they were there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was like, what the crap is all that? Oh, it's the oyster stuff.
Go check it out.
Yeah.
Check it out and see what we're doing. You know what I mean? There's several different methods you can grow. Like I have 2 methods to grow on my farm. I have a single bag, which has 2 small bullet floats is what they call it on them. So it's a single bag, put about 200 oysters in it. So I can lean over my boat, grab a single bag, put the boat, and, or I can grow with a 6-pack. And from a, I guess growing quantity of oysters, 6-pack's the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. These little single bags, it's nice if you're going to be a hobby farmer. I get it. But for these, if you want to grow a quantity of oysters, you need to do a 6-pack. Or they make 4-packs, they make 2-packs.
And that's just, I'm guessing, multiple floats in a row, or what is that?
No,
multiple cages in a row?
Yeah, so it's cages in a row. And when I say a 6-pack, I mean it's got 6 slots for bags to fit in with oysters.
So you're raising 6 bags at a time.
6 bags at a time in 1 cage. Or, like I said, on my other line, I've got single bags. So I just snap these single bags off the line. That brings up another subject. We've been very lucky so far that we've not had a whole lot of oyster pirating go on. When I say oyster pirating, I mean people stealing oysters out of our cages. These cages are not locked. It's like a crab trap. They're not locked.
No, they're locked. They're locked. They're locked. Everybody, they're locked. No, they're absolutely locked.
But here's the deal, guys. Y'all go out there.
That's
you're messing with somebody's livelihood.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, time and work that they put into it.
Right.
That
don't even make
I bet
sense.
one thing I would assume too, it's probably for somebody who's not doing it and into it like you are, it would be intimidating.
Yeah.
Just
because you wouldn't even know what to do.
Yeah,
when you
how am I getting
up.
this up? It ain't just like a crab trap where you just pick it up and everybody's familiar with them and you know how to get them out.
And then you pull up a bag full of these little little tadpoles. Like, what am I supposed to do with this?
And
this
you're
ain't the
doing
right
it at
one.
night and you're neck deep water. It's
Yeah,
like, wait a minute,
yeah,
I'm getting tired of getting all these little babies out of here. I ain't got any honey yet, but so it's one of those things, man. We're thankful that nobody, for the most part, has been ravaging these things or trying to steal, because it's a steal. And from what I understand, one oyster theft is a felony. So
really?
So it's a big
Good
deal.
Lord.
I'd have to double check on that, but I'm pretty sure it's a felony.
Just buy it.
Just buy it.
It's way cheaper to just buy
it. Is, man. Yeah. And you're messing with somebody that's put a lot of time and effort and love into growing these things, man. And most people out there, they're not doing it as a primary source of income. They're doing it because they love it.
Yeah.
And when you love something, it takes all the work out of it. I'm typically sore on Saturdays when I work them on Fridays, but I'm smiling. You can ask my wife. I'm smiling the whole time I'm talking about oysters. I'm full of salt, man. It's like, oh man, this is good.
What's the is there friendly competition out there? Like who's got the best flavor, best size, the best looking oyster?
Is there a best spot? Do you get to pick your spot out there?
You do get to pick the spot. So you lease bottom land from the Secretary of State.
Okay.
And you get to choose your 2 acres that you want to lease, or you can lease an acre. It's about $84 an acre, so it's not a lot of money.
Okay.
And you get to pick your spot and different depths in every little square or acre that you'd look at. But it's really, we're all growing about the same we're all growing the same oyster.
Right.
So it's kind of like a row of tomatoes, man. You go out there and you hoe your row every day and you fertilize it just right and you water it. And I go out there and I don't do nothing. I spray a little Roundup and just knock the weeds out.
My tomatoes suck.
That's exactly right. But yours are going to look better than mine. But I'm okay with that. So the more time you spend out there, the better oyster that you're going to produce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you say time, I'm what I'm reading into it. It's almost like a kid. When they're younger, you got to spend way more time to them, and then when they get older, you can kind of step back and say, "Okay, y'all can stay at the house by yourself. Just don't leave the house."
Self-sufficient.
That's a
Right?
good analogy, man.
Yeah.
Good analogy, because that's a lot of truth there. So when these things are small, they're in a very small mesh bag. Typically, the smallest mesh bag I have is a 2 millimeter mesh bag. So that's a little bit larger mesh than a screen that's on your window. So these things, algae grows on there, barnacles grow on there, all kind of funk gets caught up in there. And if you don't have open screens, these things can't get fresh water to breathe and filter.
So they're not.
And they'll die.
Yeah.
So when they're tiny like that, you do have to go out there every week, scrub them down with a brush, change the bag. It's called husbandry.
There we go.
So you got to be a good.
So you're raising a kid.
You're raising a kid, man.
Yeah,
That's
there's
what
just
you're doing.
15,000 of them.
And when they become a teenager, at that point you can back off just a little bit, but you
Yeah.
still got to look over them, right?
That's right.
I got
Right.
some teenagers. I
Yeah.
know how it works.
Yeah. We got a couple of them.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a lot of truth to that. And when they get to become almost mature, at that point, you're just they're in a big mesh bag. I typically put them in an 18 millimeter mesh bag, which is it has holes in it about big as a dime.
Okay.
So they don't get clogged typically. There's a time that there's a barnacle spawn, different times of the year, the barnacle spawn. So you got to make sure you blow those off with a pressure washer, or you scrape them off, or you can just change the bag, whatever the case is. So
what's it like? Because you mentioned this earlier, you like the peddling part of it as much as you like the farming part of it. I want to hear some about that. So once oysters have been grown to the appropriate size, and I'm assuming you size them, right? Do you size them before you harvest them? I think I'm trying to remember things from the last one that we did.
Yeah.
Or is it
So when do you
strictly
pull
on
yours?
time?
Yeah, when do you pull yours?
We mentioned salinity. I know that's a part of it.
Yep. So salinity is a part of it. Size is an important part of it. They used to go off the rule 3-2-1, 3 inches long, 2 inches wide, and 1 inch deep. And that's pretty much a good solid oyster in that shell.
Okay.
But I've gotten to where, since I've been doing it on year 3 now, I can look at the oyster. I've got some that look like a golf ball. I mean, they're that round. So I know when you pop this sucker open, it's going to have a big hunk of meat in it. And it doesn't get anywhere close to 3 inches long or 2 inches wide.
Just a big gumball.
It's a big gumball, man. It's a giant gumball. And it's like, I wish I could figure out how to grow that, because that's a cool thing. I call it my golf balls. You know what I mean? So it really doesn't. I don't go off of 3 inches, 3-2-1.
So you just go off seeing multiple oysters.
If it's got a deep cup, which is the depth of the oyster, if it's got a deep cup, man, I know what the meat looks like in it, and I'll harvest that sucker. Now, I can tell you, as it gets cold, when it gets bitter cold out there, I tell people that go out with me from time to time, I say, these oysters grow when it's cold like that. They grow big time. So that means it's freezing me to death. And if it's close, it's harvested.
I got you. I was trying to put the science behind it. Like,
I'm about to say, because they've been growing this week pretty good.
He's like,
no, that's a good enough one. Throw it in. We're getting out of here.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
If you like it, I love it type thing. You know what I mean? So when it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
And I'm not a third generation salty guy, so I'm kind of the first generation that's salty, so I'm having to learn a lot of this stuff as I go.
Okay.
And but everybody out there's plenty of market for every farmer out there, so nobody's really competing at all.
Right.
There's no, hey, your oyster's prettier than mine. Well, you might have spent a little more time with yours. And what market are you trying to appeal to? I want to feed the people that live in the area, and that's why I'm selling it to local folks and not restaurants, and at this point, and not sending them up the East Coast. I could go after the money, and I could send them up the East Coast and probably get $1.50 a piece for these things. But look, I love the peddling part, like you said.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal: they start off with a text. I have to tell
them.
I
didn't peddle anything. You just told me a price and I paid it. I didn't know there was peddling involved.
Yeah, you could have negotiated the price.
Yeah, man.
I don't know about the price.
Right. How about $20?
but it's one of those things I get to meet people.
Yeah.
And that's one thing getting out of the corporate world that I missed. When I see somebody at the grocery store, I want to give them 20 minutes. If they want to talk, I want to talk to them for 20 minutes. And that's one thing that I've been able to capture over the past year and a half of getting out of the corporate world is if I see Joey or you guys in the store and we want to talk for a few minutes, let's talk. Let's not look at our watch and be in a hurry.
I'm not nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go. And that forces a lot of my friends and I to meet up on Friday because they bought oysters. I'll talk to them for 15, 20 minutes or whatever the case is. And they go on, our paths are forced to cross.
Right. That's awesome.
And that's a cool thing. I love that part of
Absolutely.
it. And there's people from all walks of life that love oysters.
Oh, man. How far are you getting clients?
So I tell you what, so last Friday I had a guy from Pensacola that a buddy of mine recommended to him that I sell oysters. He stayed an extra night in Ocean Springs to just about oysters for me on Friday. So
that was a pretty good deal for him. He got to stay extra night in Ocean Springs and hang out and eat and get oysters.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I sent him home with some great salty oysters. He was tickled to death. He said he comes over here on a regular basis. So that's probably as far reach as I've been.
That's pretty good though.
Yeah, most of my clients are in the state. A lot of them are in Harrison and Hancock and Jackson County by design.
Yeah.
Some in George County as well.
Yeah.
How large did you say earlier that is it 800? How large is the farm area?
So it's 800 acres.
That's what I thought you said.
Is the aquaculture park.
In how much of the demand that's out there can that 800 acres supply? Nowhere near all of what the demand is, right? It's not even close, right? I wouldn't think. Yeah.
That's because you got them in all different stages. You're not going to harvest 8.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I just wouldn't think that 800 acres would be enough compared to what we used to have, right? Like when you talk about the natural stuff, right?
So here's a good analogy here is on each acre doing off-bottom aquaculture, you can raise up to 2 million oysters.
Oh, no, that's a lot.
On 1 acre.
Seems like.
Now, that's a tight farm. That's running very efficiently. So do the math on that.
That is a lot of oysters.
That's a lot of oysters.
You're going to have loss, like we mentioned earlier. They're not all going to survive, I would assume. I don't know if that's built into that number or not. But the reason I was asking all that was to say, is there plans to expand any of that as far as size goes, or is it everybody's comfortable with that 800 acres now?
Right now, I'd be willing just to guess. I bet you there's not 25 acres that's leased.
Oh,
out of
wow.
So there's that much out there.
Yeah. All right, I'm glad we got to that.
I have 200. I have 200 to 300 1,000 oysters out at my farm on a regular basis, and I don't have but 2 acres.
Okay.
I thought when I first got into this, man, I was ordered 700,000 seed, and I'm gonna get 10 acres.
You thought you was gonna be the Walmart oysters.
That's what I thought, man. It's like I'm going in deep on this one. But that's not the case at all. It's just you got to
too much work.
It's too much work. And it's too much work, and it's uncontrollable on how often they die and what causes them to die. So I would be willing to guess that I have a 30 to 40% dead loss ratio. But here's the deal: you buy these things at about a penny a piece, so I can afford to buy double what I expect to harvest, and I'm okay with that. And if they survive, hey, great.
I guess that's every farm. I mean, you're going to buy way more than what you're going to harvest for sure.
Yeah, if you can, but there's always going to be loss, no matter what you're doing. But where's your supplier? Where do they come from?
It's DMR, right?
Well, no,
used to be.
No, so Auburn, from what I understand, Auburn University is the biggest, I guess, hatchery out there. Auburn. So what they do is
I don't know how much fresh water. I mean, salt water's in Auburn, but
I don't even. It's artificial salt water, right? So what they do is they sell these big-eyed larvae. They breed the oysters. They sell these big-eyed larvae, and I think the last number I seen, you can get 1 million big-eyed larvae for $1,000.
Wow.
So then you got to bring them home. Hope they make.
You got to pick them up.
So you got to pick them up.
Damn, Amazon won't deliver them.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, right?
Put them in a box and send them down
I'm
here.
sure they
come
would,
on, man.
But the dead loss might be horrendous.
Yeah.
So you get them to your nursery as fast as you can. You have to attach them to some mulch material, which is, it's not sand, but it's smaller than a grain of sand. It's like a clay material. And once it attaches that big-eyed larvae to that piece of granular material. At that point, you keep it going in a circular bath almost, where they don't grow into a cluster. They stay singles.
You want the singles.
They stay singles.
Everybody wants single oysters.
That's right. And then they put them in this bottle nursery, which is basically a giant 2-liter bottle that has water filtrating through it. And then they start filtering. And at that point, they just grow to whatever R size that they can sell. So there's a couple different nurseries down here on the coast. Magnolia Point has a nursery. Gulf Coast Research Lab, they have a nursery. They sell seed as well. So there's a couple different places that you can get seed from. But a lot of times, man, they're going to the highest bidder. They're sending 1 million seed out to Texas. They're sending 1 million seed out here.
Sounds like we need to open it sounds like Brian Butler over at Ocean Springs in his horticulture class needs to start growing oysters.
Man, it's
you know about his program over at Ocean Springs?
Yes, I've heard a brief
horticulture program. Yeah, that sounds like if you could do this with all the schools and sell them out, that would be awesome.
They're doing it at Moss Point, so that brings up a whole nother topic. So we're actively pursuing what they call wet storage. So wet storage, it's a little bit complicated, but basically it's an aquarium. So I can take an oyster when the salinity is down to 10 parts per thousand, like we talked about. I can take that oyster, I can bring it to my aquarium, for lack of better description.
Right.
And I can turn the salinity up to whatever I want to. If I want it to be 24 parts per thousand, I turn 24 parts per thousand. I set my oysters in that.
And when you say turn it up, you just add salt to the water?
You add salt to the water. Right. And then I put it in this big aquarium. And in 48 hours, guess what? My oyster's salty.
Yeah.
It's 24 parts per thousand. It's changed the salinity completely to that oyster. It puts them in a dormant state. All they're doing is breathing in a wet storage at that point.
Is that different than the technique you described earlier, where I guess the people that have already harvested them add salt to them, and then they just end up swelling up with water, and they're not?
Yep. So that's
just completely different.
Totally different.
Yeah.
So the meat is already grown in our oyster.
Okay.
At that point, all they're
you just got to salt it up.
We're just salting it up.
Okay.
They're just putting a little bit of salt in there,
Gotcha.
so it's breathing. It's not filtering anymore. At that point, it's just breathing.
Okay.
Because the temperature is way down, so they're in a dormant state. You basically put UV lights in there, so it kills every kind of nutrient that's in there. So it's not feeding.
It's just just taking salt water in and putting it out.
That's all it's doing. Just straight salt water.
That's
in
awesome.
and out.
I love it. I love when science is cool like that. You know what I mean? And
tell me
makes it work.
That's right.
There's always been the I guess old man's tale, or my grandpa told me about fog and oysters. Do you know that?
The which one now?
The fog and oysters, how you can't shuck oysters on a foggy day because they close down because there's water in the atmosphere. Have you ever heard that?
So I've never heard that one. So tell me a little bit more about that.
What I've heard is you can't shuck oysters on when they come out of the water, they kind of open up a little bit. The oysters kind of open up a little bit. So when it's fog, they think they're still in the water. So they shut down, lock down tight. So that's why you can't shuck oysters on a foggy day, because they think they're still in the water.
Makes sense. I've heard the R in the months that
shuck oyster. Yeah, when to get R. Yeah.
Yeah, and all that has to do is they go through a reproduction cycle during the summer. So they start reproducing during the summer. The diploids do. And basically they turn to a jelly, just a clear jelly, because all their energy goes to reproduction. And that's why you can't do it in the summer.
I also heard it had to do with the days before there was refrigeration too. You didn't want to ship them in those months as well because it was hotter.
That's exactly right. So from my understanding is all oysters have Vibrio, which is the bacteria that's dangerous to everybody.
Right.
It's just
low amounts.
That's right. Can you get it into a mechanical refrigeration before that Vibrio becomes active?
Right. Okay.
And that's the game. In the summer, we only have like an hour and a half to get them from farm to mechanical refrigeration.
Wow.
So I stopped harvesting early May, and I don't pick up harvesting to September, because guess what? I sell oysters to people I know.
Yeah.
I peddle oysters to people I know. And the
you don't want them
thing
getting
I
sick.
want to do is get somebody sick.
Yeah.
And that's hepatitis, I'm guessing. You're going off a raw oyster, right?
Well, or Vibrio, like you mentioned too, right?
What is the main thing to get off of them?
It's Vibrio.
Is it Vibrio?
It's the Vibrio is the bacteria, and that's all I can talk to that.
Yeah.
I don't know about the hepatitis and different things.
Right.
But we make sure all of our oysters go from farm to mechanical refrigeration. We have different times every month of the year. We have a different time frame.
I was going to ask that.
That we have to get to mechanical refrigeration in this amount of time. Now, November, December rolls around, we have 15, 16, up to 18 hours from time
Yeah,
to
when it
time.
gets cold outside.
Yeah, because it's cold outside, and these things just kind of shut down basically. They clamp down, they keep all the fluids inside of them. And
are they harder to open in those months, do you think?
I've kind of become immune to that. Yeah, I have, because once you figure out, I got these New Hampshire style knives, and basically instead of the straight bladed knives, the sharp ones that'll go into your hands.
Yeah,
I've discovered this New Hampshire style, and I don't think it's anything new.
It's a clam knife. That's the same one I got, I think. Has it got a blunt end?
It's got a blunt. Well, it's got a little point at the end, but the tip goes up. So basically, when you press this thing down, you get it in the hinge.
It's like a lever action.
It is. So on these farm raised oysters, easier to go through the hinge than what I call the beak.
That's what I do. I always go through the hinge. I think it's safer and easier.
It is. So basically, instead of having to go all the way down with your knife, you don't have to go but halfway down, because you got that point that's already pivoting up. It's hinging up. So that's the oyster knife that I sell. And, it's one of those things, man, I buy them for $15. I sell them for 20 because Joey comes and buys oysters from me. He's like, do you have a knife? And he's like, well, I got one, but I don't really know where it's at.
I got a hammer. I got 2 hammers.
Yeah. And I've heard screwdrivers and hammers and all kind of stuff. And it works. That works too.
But I've always used the blunt knife. I've always been scared of, the pointed sharp knives, because I've seen too many people just run it straight to their palm, and that's a bad situation.
And look, it takes about 2 or 3 weeks for that to heal.
Yeah,
if it doesn't get infected.
Yeah,
because I've done it multiple times myself. Now I wear a glove on the left hand.
Absolutely.
And I use a special knife, and it works great for me.
Well, I even went to an oyster bench, and those are money. They're like $10. You get a 2x6, a treated 2x6, and you just cut a little bench and put a little thing. You put the oyster right there, and then you just hold it on top and go through. So if the knife goes through, it hits the wood. $10, and it's easy to do.
Being smart, man, makes life easier.
But it makes your butt hurt, because it hurts. You got to sit on it all night long.
Especially
when you got to freaking shuck a whole burlap sack of oysters for everybody else who doesn't shuck anything, like my wife.
There you go. And there's all kind of different mechanisms now. They've got things that have a point on them. You put the oyster down there and you crack them, and it pops the seal. So there's all kind of different
people getting fancy.
They're getting fancy. That's exactly right. And I think it's cool. It's just people being innovative. So
do you ever see a point where we go back to actually oysters on the bottom here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast?
Man, I hope that's the case. I mean, because all it does is make our whole ecology on the Gulf Coast better. It makes our fisheries better. Makes our water quality better.
We need to get somebody in here from the research lab or whatever, BMR, and to explain to us like the science behind, like you said, how many gallons per 52, 55 per oyster?
55 gallons.
55 gallons per oyster per day.
Okay, and then you add up how many we've lost. Right. And even though y'all are out there, you said you're using 24 acres out of a total of 800. I mean, there's something's missing, like by a lot. Right. And so how is this water being filtered? What has stepped up in its place, if anything?
If anything,
probably nothing.
The menhaden out there, they're filter feeders. So there's several different fish that are out there that are filter feeders.
Right.
But when you take that much out of our whole water, our Gulf, our Mississippi
it's
Sound,
just mud on
it's
mud.
got to make a difference.
Well, I mean, everybody, all these old timers, and I say old timers, my grandpa and all that stuff. Y'all don't imagine what the fish was back in the day. Well, yeah, y'all was fishing on 1,000-foot oyster shell beds before y'all dug them all up. Of course, there was more fish.
We've seen the photos. We know what it looked like.
I mean, they'll have shrimp, they'll have fish, they'll have all these things on the oyster bed,
and they destroyed it.
And all of a sudden they're gone.
Well, in their defense, I don't think they knew the science behind it. They were just like, hey, if I'm going to live off the land, I'm going to harvest every day. We're going to eat like kings. But now we're kind of paying the consequences of
they
them.
were trying to survive.
I was they were trying to survive, and then all of a sudden they can make money off of it, and then technology gets better, and you can like industry gets involved, right? It's just like what capitalism does. It starts to work, but then until you pump the brakes on the environmental side of it, you can destroy an ecosystem. And hopefully we haven't done that. I don't think we have. We definitely put a major dent in it, but it is good to see the turning of the tide. That's a good reference.
That's a good
to y'all doing it like you're saying, like artificially, right?
Sure. I think we have a healthy fishery as a whole.
Yes.
I think we do, regardless of how many people balk about snapper. I mean, that's a big topic
Mm-hmm.
and all this other stuff. But we have one of the better fisheries in the Gulf of Mexico, right here in our backyard.
Yeah.
And I always thought that the brown water just meant it was crap water. That's not the case at all. It's all the nutrients coming out of the rivers, and that's why we have one of the best oyster fisheries around. That's why we have some of the best speckled trout, some of the best redfish in the Gulf. For that reason. Second to Louisiana. Louisiana has just a big estuary.
For sure.
But that's where it starts.
Texas,
everything you're talking about, that's where it starts.
Yeah.
It does. It does. So, and I love to catch a cooler full of whatever, just like anybody else. But I mean, how many can I eat?
Correct.
How many can our family and friends eat?
And we've gotten away with that, especially from all the guys that we've had on the show. We all want to just fill our freezers up with fish, but I mean, how much fish do you eat in a year? You know what I'm saying? It's like that fish is going to sit there for 2 or 3 years and be ruined by the time you do it. So go out once a month, catch 4 or 5, have your fish fry, and be good with it.
I think our generation is kind of realizing that it's not a cool thing to have a freezer full of fish.
Yeah, because you don't eat it.
Because you don't eat it.
Yeah, it just sits there in a plastic bag.
Look, if you're going to have a fish fry, start 2 weeks from now, and let's go catch what we're going to eat. And let's eat them all up.
That's it. It's fresh. It tastes better.
It is, but it's nice to have a frozen bag from time to time. I get
absolutely, yeah. But you don't need 18, 20.
Man, you don't.
Right.
You don't. And I give them away. Well, let those guys invite those guys fishing next time.
Let them catch it.
Let them catch it fresh.
Right.
And notice the difference.
That's
after it's hadn't been frozen or hadn't been in water or whatever the case is. So it's a big difference.
I love it.
I got one more.
Go ahead.
The rental part of the equipment. Can you go over that of what you got from the beginning to what you have to purchase now?
Yeah, so the DMR, like I said, they gave us 7,500 oysters to start with. We got hit with Ida, so it ripped up all kind of anchors and different things. So they redoled out everything to us. And so let's just say we raised 10,000 oysters per student in the program.
Okay.
And they give you all the cages, or they lend you all the cages, all the gear, all the bags, all the instructions that you need for that year cycle. And then at that point, you say, okay, I want to be a farmer. And then you you have to get like a bunch of permits, which is crazy, and it doesn't register in my mind because it's always a permits due somewhere down the line.
Right.
But then you
nickel and dime,
and then you lease your acreage. Then you're like, okay, how much extra money do I have? So I got to have a boat that I can go out there and get scraped all up. That's not a pretty boat. So that's going to cost you $15,000, somewhere around there.
Something with a good motor on it.
Something with a good motor. All you want to do is get from the harbor to your farm and back.
Right.
You don't really care what it looks like. It's got to have cover. Right. So you got to have cover on the shades of some sort. My boat is a 24-foot Carolina skiff that I got some friends of mine to build this big rack on top of it. I have a four-wheeler or UTV winch on it. I hook it to these cages. I winch my cage up on the side of the boat, open the gate, pull these bags out, dump it on my table that I made at the house, And,
so y'all are like pioneers. Y'all are custom making all this stuff that people in the future are going to use.
That's exactly right. I had some friends of mine that were home for the Christmas holidays last year. They're welders, very talented welders. And I was like, God, they were looking for extra work. I was like, guys, I got something that I don't know a lot about welding, but here's what the end product I want it to be. And man, they did a fantastic job. And then I built the table. It's nothing special. I got something to measure my oysters start with. And then once I learned how to look at them, it was different case. So, then you got to buy the ropes, the anchors, you got to buy the cages, you got to buy the bags, and you really got to have that time that you're willing to dedicate once a week. At least once.
You're into it pretty heavily,
man. I'm gonna guess. I quit keeping track of it. It's kind of like deer hunting. You know what I mean?
You don't want to know. You don't want to know.
That's why I tell my wife's like, every time you take the cover off the boat, it's $500. I'm like, yeah, it's only $500 this time, baby.
But the time we spend on it's priceless, right?
Yes.
So I'm gonna guess that I probably got $30,000 in equipment right out of the gate, and but once you do that, then all you got to do is change your gear out every 5 years, or as it deteriorates, as the salt eats it up. The boat, I had to buy a membership at Cito.
Yep.
Because look, let me tell you a little quick little story, real quick.
Yeah.
So I was out there by myself. Typically I go by myself. Sometimes my boys go with me. Sometimes my wife does. And sometimes friends do, but this day I just have to be by myself. I get on the other side of Deer Island, about 4 miles away from the boat launch, and the boat motor just dies. And I'm like, what the world's going on? Long story short, I'm like, it can't be that deep. So I had a flat pointed shovel, so I started paddling. I'm like, this ain't gonna work. No. So I jumped
that
out.
anchor, throw it out.
Well, I jumped out. I called a couple friends. They were, off the beaten path. They couldn't come scoop me up. So I started walking this thing in. I walked it to Deer Island. Then I walked it down that rock jetty till I found the first gap. And then once I go through the gap, you can't touch the bottom. So
you're swimming.
I'm swimming and I'm towing this boat. Eventually I make it all the way around. And the guy that owns Mike Moore, that owns the Shrimp Tour boat, he saw me. He's like, hey, man, you need some help? I'm like, yeah, I needed help like 2 hours ago, buddy.
Yeah,
I been need some help.
That's right. And he said, I tell you what, hook to this big boat. He said, I'm going to tow you. You got to go on the Shrimp Tour with me. He said, but the good news is I'm not going to charge you for the Shrimp Tour.
Yeah.
And I said, fantastic.
There you go. That's
I wanted to come on it anyway.
Right. So we get almost back to the harbor, and I'm working on the motor the whole time. It cranks up. So I bought a membership to Cito.
Won't ever have that problem again.
Probably won't ever have that problem again.
Well, I mean, you won't have to jump out. Yeah.
Peace of mind. And it's like I said, it's only $200, and I'm right there. So that was a peace of mind for me. Especially when I'm out there by myself. So Cito is definitely a wonderful thing for certain circumstances.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What where are we sending people? What's the best way? They've heard the podcast, they've been watching this or whatever, and they want to reach out and get some of the product and taste it for themselves. So you mentioned having trouble getting the Facebook page set up, but how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So one of the things, guys, since I actually had a quantity of oysters that I could sell for multiple months this year, I'm going to try to sell them over the next 6 to 8 months. The first week I harvested 2,000, sold them in 3.5 days, based on Facebook. And I did it by myself on a Friday, and I didn't get done until about 8:30 that night. And I said, I am not doing this anymore. I got to have a limit. So the next 4 weeks I've harvested about 1,000 a week. And that's doable. I'm finished by 4:30 in the afternoon. They're clean, delivered, ready to go. So you can either look up, you can either call my cell phone number at 228-218-4562.
There you go.
Or you can look up online. We had to put our Facebook page instead of Two Crackers Oyster Company. Kept on getting rejected. So we had to put it under Mark space Anna, ANNA, Havard. And you can look us up, and we're open to the public. We're not Facebookers. We're not on there every day showing you what we got to eat last night or where we're going to the grocery store, none of that garbage. It's just
so if you need to get an order, text is better than Facebook.
I would assume, yeah.
Text is better than Facebook. If you can let me know before Friday, because pretty much, once I get my 1,000 for that week, I'm done. I tell everybody, hey, look, I would love to get you an extra 100, but I can't. I'll get you next week.
Yeah.
So, but just send me a text, 228-218-4562. And like I said, I have had no trouble selling these things. They go like hotcakes because I only harvest when they're good. And you'll be pleased.
There we go. Well, we got to get help with that Facebook page, getting it going on. So I don't know if there's any way we can send a message to Mark or something, Zuckerberg, and let him know. But we got to get you a Facebook page.
What do you see the uptick going into the holidays? Is this your first holiday?
So last year I had a small amount. So definitely there's an uptick. I was able to sell these things all the way up until April, May of last year. Just sell them like hotcakes. I can't grow them fast enough. Yeah. And if there's a young person out there that really wants to go in a business that, the opportunities are there, the oyster business opportunities are there. Yeah. If you're willing to take the risk, the demand is there, guys. I mean, and none of these farmers, we're not cutting anybody's throat. Most of the folks out there are selling for $1 a piece. I'm not there. I'm selling at 85 cents. I'm probably one of the cheaper folks out there.
Yeah.
And I called one of the local seafood wholesalers the other day, because I went from 75 cents to 85 cents. And I said, hey, what are you guys getting for your single selects? And they said $1 a piece. And I went, holy mackerel. And I didn't go that route, but there's a lot of folks that are selling for $1 a piece. And at some point next year, I might be at $1 a piece with inflation and all that stuff.
Yeah, you have to cover your gas and all those.
And it's a lot of work. I get it. And I'm not running any P&Ls at this point in my game, but at some point I might have to go up, and the market's just there.
Yep.
But if you want a quality product, get it from one of these local farmers. You don't have to get it from me, but get it from one of these local farmers, man, because they've got love involved and a little bit of luck, and turned it into a business. And
Sweet.
And they taste really good.
yeah, it tastes really good.
Hey, you got some merch on too. Do y'all sell that merch?
Man, we did. Last year we bought 100 shirts, and some friends of mine made these cups for us. I thought it was super cool.
Awesome. Yeah.
We're not selling these cups.
They look good.
But I appreciate that. But he got them made for us, and I thought that was super cool. But these shirts, at some point, when we get this wet storage up and going, it's expensive. We might sell some swag out there, and we will.
Yeah.
But right now, we just don't have any swag. I typically, if I have a returning customer, I'll give them a shirt or a sticker or something like that. These stickers go on your cooler. They typically look like this.
I got one.
Yeah. So put it on your cooler, something like that. I don't expect you to put it on your bumper, your back window, but it's just it's a cool sticker. You know what I mean?
Man.
And we're enjoying every minute of it. And I smile that's my favorite day of the week. I look forward to Fridays every week.
And with the holidays coming up with all that oyster dressing and everything else, you're going to be a busy man.
I am.
I love hearing the story. I love you dig it, man. That's always cool. That's kind of a theme on the show. We like talking to people that are in their niche and appreciate what they do. So much luck to you. Thank you for the gear. Thank you for the shirts. We appreciate that. Thanks for stopping by and talking and telling us your story, man. And
for sure.
Hope everything works out great and just grow, right?
Yep.
Literally, right? Grow the oysters
Grow
and grow
them
the
all.
business, right?
That's exactly right.
So, yeah,
Very
and we're going to do
you guys having me.
Yeah,
we're going to do a selfless plug. Y'all go check out what is this? Southern Mississippi Living Magazine. Miss Jennifer Cox, she does a great job, and all her team.
Yep.
We're actually in it this month, so for the boys episode, so go check that out and go get some oysters, man.
Yep.
Two Crackers Oysters,
love it.
and you'll be you'll want more. I can promise you that, because I want more already.
All right, well, thank y'all for tuning in.